America was the second Egypt. Ancient artifacts of Joseph, son of Jacob, who saved Israel, found in the Grand Canyon and all the way up to Ohio and Illinois. Every new discovery has its dangers. In the version of this story, in 1982, Russell Burroughs rediscovered a cave along a branch of the Little Wabash River near his hometown of Olney, Illinois. But he only looted the tomb cave in Illinois. Some of his published information for identifications, his artifacts have been proved to be correct. An artifact from the Burroughs Cave in Illinois by Russell Burroughs shows the best preserved artifacts for the exact face structure of Joseph, who had been named King Zoroaster by King Zoroaster of Shemau, which is now the Egypt that we know, in northern Africa. King Zoroaster of Shemau of Egypt wrote he found another place for Egyptians to live because Egypt had become overpopulated by the time he was 36 years old. This date would be around 1744 BC. 3 book pieces of this same face structure and crown style were found in the ruins at Aravis, which is now Egypt, that we know in northern Africa, where he ruled. Shemau ruled for 48 years. The Mormons have records for him, including some of his writings. Information from his 12 trips to a foreign land was in a gold book that was part of the Dead Sea Scrolls discovered, and they were new records for him. The artifact was identified as the artifact of King Zephaniah of Egypt, who was, of course, the righteous Joseph, the second youngest son of Jacob of the 12 tribes of Israel. So Joseph was renamed King Zephaniah of Egypt. He was a Joseph in the Old Testament of the Holy Bible. He was second to Pharaoh. After Pharaoh, it was Joseph who was renamed Zephaniah. Moses was raised by Pharaoh, named Tutmosis III. He was raised by the daughter of Pharaoh, so he was raised as, of course, an heir or a prince of Egypt. So Tutmosis III, who was of Syrian descent, spoke the middle dialect of the Lasana language of Syria, and that was the language that Moses had spoken also. He learned how to speak that because he was raised there. Moses wrote in the Lasana language that he spoke. The Pharaoh named Joseph Zephaniah Paneah, Zaphith Paneah. The direction of the boat on King Zoroaster crown is coming to the Ohio River, the higher river of Ophir in Atlantis. The first name for North America was Atlantis, they say. Ophir was part of Atlantis. Atlan became all of North America and is now the United States of America and Canada. King Zoroaster ruled Egypt from the temple of Amos at Aravis, Shemau, and recorded 12 trips to Ophir, that is United States, North America, that became his second land of Egypt. Second land of Egypt was in fact America, and that's why we find so many artifacts with ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs and writings and all these artifacts here. And of course the structures themselves being the pyramids and the mummies. Some historians and some archaeologists are aware of this information, but some historians and archaeologists are unaware of it. The sun of the right hand symbol, meaning Christ, is on the bottom right hand side of an artifact. Then the box above the symbol is the Semitic symbol for the Ark of the Covenant. It's a strong indication that King Zephaniah, or Joseph the Righteous, who ruled Egypt for 48 years, ruled Egypt according to the 10 Commandments in the Bible. And let's not forget that he was weaned by his proper biological mother, and he was there so he knew her, and he knew that he was Hebrew by descent. So of course he knew they didn't have the 10 Commandments yet. They had to leave Egypt, and they were given the Ten Commandments at the time of Moses, which was about 415 years after Joseph. Nevertheless, they did have a code of law. So he ruled Egypt for 48 years, according to the Ten Commandments in the Bible. The son of the right hand symbol on the right corner of the artifact is a Semitic symbol. This Semitic symbol has been found on other artifacts in Middle Eastern countries. The symbol meant the first son of mother instead of father. When a father had two wives, he may have had two sons of the right hand. So it was the first son of the mother instead of father. The three diamonds are Egyptian symbols for the greatest wealth. There are three diamonds on his artifact. This is a strong indication that he was a king at three locations. We think the third location, of course, was the huge complex, pyramid complex of the Grand Canyon. Then on the top is M. The M is for a symbol which means for his Egypt, my Egypt. And then the umbrella shape means the umbrella empire of both lands of Egypt that was established by King Zephaniah from Egypt. King Zephaniah wrote that he found another place for Egyptians to farm and mine when he was 36 years old. This research dated back to 1744 BC. The artifact was also identified by another research group as being an artifact for Julius Caesar. The gold artifact recovered from Burroughs Cave in Illinois has been identified as a tripod that was used to measure the degrees of the stars. So it was in some way a compass. These degrees and measurements are at the top of the artifact. There are numerous other similar worldwide artifacts for tripods that have been used for this same purpose. It's the only tripod artifact that has been discovered here in the United States. Some tripod artifacts have been found in Canada as well. These tripods were used first for ancient sundial calendars. Later, these tripods were used to make ancient maps. And these ancient maps even included measurements that had north, south, east, west locations and the star degrees on the maps. And besides each, the center post of the tripod are 6 lines, which are the 12 recorded trips to Ophir, or the second land of Egypt, that he found using a star tripod that was well recorded by King Zephaniah of Egypt. Then above the lines is a Y that has a large stone jar in it. This was the Egyptian hieroglyph symbol for grain seed to be saved for the next year. Then above the Y is a jar and a sheep. The sheep were needed here to make wool clothes. And on the right side of the center post of the tripod and the bottom is a cow with a mountain goat and a bighorn sheep at the top. And above are animals, which means many animals. It's well known by archaeologists that these animals came to North America from where they originated, which is the Middle Eastern countries. Because there are no prehistoric bones of these animals, they have ever been found in North America by archaeologists. The date to be over 4,000, it's stated to be over 4,000 years old. Now, this gold coin was recovered from the Egyptian tunnel city in southern Illinois. The upward arrow or pyramid shape was the hieroglyphic symbol for Egypt, and the 2 lines next to it on the bottom of the coin, symbol which means the second empire or both locations of Egypt. On the other side of the coin is the hieroglyphic symbol of King Zephaniah holding the staff of the Lord. The archaeological meaning of all this information is that King Zephaniah was a ruler of Egypt in the 2 separate locations in Egypt, the Egypt of Northern Africa as well as the second Egypt of North America. The archaeological meaning of all this information is that King Zephaniah was ruler in 2 separate locations of Egypt. The direction of the boat symbols are important as well. The direction of the boat symbol is for going back to Egypt. The artifact was removed from Burroughs Cave in Illinois as for King Vid 4R clue, which was easy for the archaeologists to identify. The clue indicates, CLU indicates the king of Vid IV only ruled Aztlan, or of Afir, which is North America, which was the second land of Egypt, for someone else in their absence, because the symbol, the arrow and the two lines symbol for both the lands of Egypt, is not on his artifact. There's not a boat anywhere on his artifact either. At the bottom of the left of the artifact is the Semitic sun of the right hand symbol. The Semitic sun of the right hand symbol means the birthrights and wealth of a mother to her firstborn son had passed to him. And then the rectangular box to the right of that was the symbol for the Ark of the Covenants, which means that he ruled according to the Ten Commandments. This information was wrote in the original first Semitic language of Armen. That was almost identical to the present English language, they say. King Vid IV's face structure is similar to King Zephaniah's face structure. And other artifacts found in the Burroughs Cave by the Smithsonian archaeologists was identified as Imhotep IV. The Semitic family of Imhotep was first recorded in 2650 BC in Shemau, before Shemau was renamed Egypt. It was their family symbol for the king of the land. The pyramid of the front of the crown is a symbol for the Imhotep family that had pyramids on the front of their crowns also in Egypt as well. On the right bottom, in the small X, the small Semitic sun of the right hand symbol is turned sideways on his artifact. On the top of the artifact, the symbol, the arrow and the two lines symbol means that he ruled in both locations of Egypt. And the 4+AL means that he was Imhotep the fourth, Imhotep king of both lands of Egypt. Pyramids on the headwear is similar to the pyramid headwear of the Imhotep family that built the 18 pyramids of Egypt. His face structure is also similar to artifacts from the Imhotep family in Egypt as well. This gold artifact that was recovered from Burroughs Cave was identified as artifact for King Solomon, who ruled Judea from 970 BC to 931 BC, about 40 years. There's a lot of recorded information about King Solomon. However, very little of this recorded information is in the Bible. There's no doubt about the identification of this artifact. Burroughs Cave is the lost tomb, they say, of King Solomon that was not ever found until the discovery of Burroughs Cave. He was the highest ranked king in all locations of his empire, which at that time included Judea, Egypt, and Ophir, which is well recorded information. All of the symbols on this gold artifact are the well recorded symbols for King Solomon. The arrow plus the two lines, symbol for the king who ruled both locations of Egypt, is on the left bottom of his gold artifact. The M, which means my, is on the bottom of the artifact as well. And the three lines, the three L's, near the bottom of the artifact mean 3 trips that King Solomon made to Aztlan of the Empire of Ophir, meaning North America. King Solomon kept this location unknown from his enemies to mine gold, silver, and diamonds. Hence, King Solomon's gold mines are in North America. We know the tremendous amount of silver the American Indians have been mining and still do. You know, there are fantastic natural resources in America. 1 Kings 9:26, and King Solomon said, made a navy of ships in Ezion-Geber, which is beside Eloth, on the shores of the Red Sea and the land of Edom. There were several artifacts for King Solomon found in Ohio, Michigan, and even New Mexico, all over America. But this gold artifact from Burroughs Cave is the only known artifact for the exact face structure of King Solomon that has been found anywhere. Burroughs Cave in Illinois is the lost tomb, they say, of King Solomon. Another artifact you'll see here, removed from Burroughs Cave, Illinois, was identified as a high priest named Archa III. All temple priests tied their hair in this style to be identified as priest. They had a little notch in the back of their hair tied together in their back. All temple priests tied their hair in this hairstyle to be identified as priests. Later, Christian priests trimmed and tied their hair in this same way to be identified as Christian priests. The writing on this artifact is in the Berber writing style of Mauritania, which was North Africa. instead of being written in Hebrew or the early Latin language. The Berber language, we know St. Augustine and St. Monica were Berbers. They're basically the people that we see today of Egypt. They're not European, they're not African, they're somewhere in between. The Berber language was little changed from the first original Armenian Semitic language in Atlantis, and the alphabetical letters were little changed also. Arca-3 was written on the first letter being a capital letter and the last letter being a capital as well. King Solomon had temple priests at the locations where his queens ruled for him. It's well recorded that not any of the temple priests for King Solomon were of Hebrew descent. Other artifacts recovered from Burroughs Cave identified as being artifacts of handsome King Archaeological, who was known as Achilles, the viper to the Trojans of the ancient Greek history. The writing on the artifact begins on the right as BAS, was the Greek word for king, Vasilias, Basil, Vasilias, BAS, the Greek word for king. Then to the left is the word Achilles, meaning, of course, Achilles in English, coming from the Greek Achilles. Then to the left, the word VPEO translates to viper in the English language. In 1194 BC, King Achilles and his generals, Menestheus, Evdorus, Pisander, Phoenix, and Alcimedon, went to Troy in 50 boats to expand his empire. King Achilles was wounded in the heel of his foot with a poisoned arrow. The wound would not heal, and King Achilles was carried to the Isle of Lemnos in northern Greece of the Aegean Sea, where he died. Alexander Ptolemy III, the Great, recorded finding the tomb of his hero Achilles' ancestor and his ancestor, King Achilles, in the Isle of Lemnos. He loaded his crypt into his ship to be relocated to Egypt, but he came here first and died. Burroughs Cave was the final tomb of King Achilles, they say here. This artifact was recovered from Burroughs Cave and identified as artifact of Ptolemy Soter I. On the left picture, which is the front of the artifact, is the arrow with the two lines, which means he ruled from both locations. On the back side of the artifact is a picture on the right, was wrote Iur, Peter, Yugi, and et Pateriu, Efieti, Polte, Yipti. Yipti, of course, meaning Egypt. Translated into English, sworn by Jupiter to the summit of his forefathers, the living image of Ptolemy of Egypt. Ptolemy Soter I was Alexander's half-brother, Alexander the Great, that is. All of Alexander's rulers at different locations were not Ptolemies. Ptolemy Soter I recorded that Alexander Ptolemy III sent him back to Egypt to rule Egypt for him. And then he left the second land of Egypt and went to Alexandria in Egypt of northern Africa. He expected some rebellion when announced that he was the satrap for the Egyptian empire of Alexander, but Perdiccas had spies in Alexandria, Egypt, and he knew that Alexander had been absent from Alexandria, Egypt since 321 BC, and Perdiccas was trying to invade Egypt from the Upper Nile region from Babylon. But when Ptolemy Soter I and his army came near to Perdiccas and his army, Perdiccas was murdered in his tent by two of his subordinates. Ptolemy Soter I immediately crossed the Nile and gave supplies to his army. Ptolemy Soter I was consistent in his policy of first securing a power base while never succumbing to the temptation of risking all to succeed his half-brother Alexander Ptolemy III in Egypt. In 318 BC, Ptolemy Soter I announced that he was the new satrap of Egypt. Ptolemy Soter II, and in the second land of Egypt, brought the mummy of Alexander's body to Alexandria in Egypt and built a shrine for his gold crypt to be placed in. Another artifact from Burroughs Cave is for Mark Antony, who was a politician and general, we know, from Rome. As a military commander and administrator, he was an important supporter and loyal friend of Julius Caesar. Florus, a Roman, wrote that both Mark Antony and Cleopatra VII committed suicide in 30 BC at Alexandria, Egypt, which had been proved to have been totally incorrect and impossible. Cleopatra VII in October 41 BC went to Tarsus from Rome. There, Mark Antony and Cleopatra the seventh formed an alliance. We say the seventh because the original Cleopatra was Alexander the Great's sister from northern Greece in Salonika. And after that, there were many Cleopatras, of course. So this is the Cleopatra with Mark Antony, is the Cleopatra the seventh. Because since Alexander the Great, Egypt was Greek, ancient Greek territory. So they went to Rome, and Mark Antony became the triumvir for Julius Caesar, and he fell in love with Cleopatra VII. On December 25th, 40 BC, Cleopatra gave birth to twins, fathered by Mark Antony, who were named Alexander Helios III and Cleopatra Selene II, Selene meaning moon in Greek. Cleopatra Selene II that were born in Rome. After Caesar's assassination in 44 BC, Mark Antony and Cleopatra VII left Rome and went to an unknown location for their safety. Thereafter, the Romans did not even learn where they went to. They disappeared. In September 36 BC, Cleopatra had a son that was named Ptolemy Philadelphus, fathered by Mark Antony. He was born here in the land of America, in the second land of Egypt. Burroughs Cave in Illinois has the lost tomb of Mark Antony. The gold coin is the burial crypt, and that burial crypt is for Prince Alexander Elias that was in Burroughs Cave. The arrow and two lines symbol for the king of both lands of Egypt is at the top of the coin. The research Heli or Greek Ilios, sun symbol, meant light of the world. On the right side of the gold coin is the Heli or the Greek Helios symbol of the sun. The sun was a symbol for the entire Heli or Greek Helios family. The name was Heli in the Aramaic language of Judea as well, by the same family named was Ilios in the Ptolemaic Greek language of the Greek Ptolemies. The artifact was recovered from Burroughs Cave, identified as Prince Alexander Elios at age 22 from the writing in the artifact, born in Rome, 40 BC, and died in America in the second land of Egypt, 39 AD. That's like 70 years later. The sun symbol for Eli or Elios, the sun, are on all artifacts, or most members of the King Alexander Eli II family of Judea. His grandfather was Alexander Helios III of Judea, who was also recorded as Heli in the Bible. He only went to school in Alexandria, Egypt. There were numerous artifacts for him in Burroughs Cave, which was also his tomb. His parents made him the co-ruler of Armenia, Media, Parthia, of the Ptolemaic Empire. Media being, of course, today's Persia, Iran. We'll continue with part 2 of this in the next video.